back into the hat of truth and purity. We have...
I know you're such a big fan of Abraham Lincoln. I didn't actually know that about you, Tom.
Free the slaves, mate. Come on. All right, we're going to look at the Hawks next.
Ooh.
So...
There's a few cellar dwellers here, Tom.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe it'll improve as we go on. It's hard to say what the hat will produce. But Hawks, Gus, I'll let you kick this one off. Your old sparring partners.
Look, I think the Hawks are bad. There's no question about that. I was thinking about this the other day, just as, preparing for this show and trying to think about, what there was to say about the Hawks. They're real boring. That's the main thing I think about Hawthorn. Even their good players are completely or almost completely lacking in, creativity and flair. There's really Chad Wingard, who I think had a pretty good year last year, but is still way below what he was in what has at this stage been his prime when he was 22. Yeah. There's James Sicily, who's obviously coming back from an ACL and a bunch of injuries, and the umpires hate, so he never really gets to show his flair. And then, I don't know, Jaff.
Well, Jaff's the big one.
Yeah, of course. But he's 21 or something. There's Will Day, I guess, who's got some of those qualities, who's flashed some of those qualities. But other than that, they're really good players. James Warple, Diego O'Meara, Tom Mitchell. Can you think of any more vanilla trio of your best three midfielders in the AFL? They are. And they're good players, but they are not players that can turn games by acts of brilliance. They are simply solid midfielders, and they don't have anybody in the forward line who can really do that unless Wingard's playing up there. They don't really have anyone in defence who can do that. They're just a lot of good ordinary players, and that is what happens when you trade out draft picks over and over and over again. But it also means that when that comes home to roost, you are looking at a situation where you're lacking in star power. And I think, I think there's probably, for me, there's two main teams that could win the Wooden Spoon, and I think this is one of them. This is a clear one of the two.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think that their team on paper is not strong. It's stronger than I thought it was last year. Last year I was quite down on them. I tipped them for the Wooden Spoon. And then there's some players showed me that they were better than I thought they were. So guys like Jath, Scrimshaw, Hardwick in the backline all had pretty good years. And then obviously, we know that Mitchell and O'Meara are high-quality midfielders already, but guys like Kaczynski had a good year that showed he has potential. Dylan Moore up forward. So there were people that emerged last year as players that I think improved their standing a little bit in the game and at the club. But I still think that they're lacking, quality across the board. Aside from that sort of small, medium defender position, where they do look quite good. They have a lot of depth in that position. There isn't really a line in which you'd say they're strong. I think they'll back Mitch Lewis to be their sort of main man up forward this year. Cosy will obviously play down there as well, but Lewis has, from all reports, had a really strong preseason, so we'll see how that goes. It's taken him, a few years to settle in. He's still young, but he's been in and out of the side for probably 3 or 4 seasons now, so they'll be looking for him to be the number one target coming out of the goal square. Don't really think he's capable of kicking, more than 40 or so goals. So, yeah, I think that the issue with Hawthorn that we'll be keeping a watch on this year is how they blend the old and the new. There's a lot of pressure on Sam Mitchell because he was installed in place of possibly the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah, he's not getting a honeymoon period. He's not getting a honeymoon period at all, is he?
It's done.
Yeah.
And they're basically at ground zero because they haven't had they have Denver Granger Barras, who looks like a likely prospect, but they don't have really, really high draft picks in their key positions. Josh Ward should play a lot of footy next year in the midfield, but there's not many of them. So I think that they, again, like Gold Coast, they'll have some good wins. I think Sam Mitchell will instill in them a good fighting quality that will probably limit the margins, similar to what Clarkson did last year. They'll probably look to defend first, as rebuilding teams often do. But yeah, I don't see them getting out of that bottom 5 that I mentioned before. And, is there issues with Tom Mitchell, O'Meara, Wingard? They were shopped around.
Very publicly shopped, yeah.
Yeah, there's no sort of way around that. That did happen. Obviously, they're professional players. They get on with it. They come back to the club and they get on with it. But I'm interested to see how Mitchell structures this side up, whether he does start to float different guys through the midfield in those positions because he wants his brand and his own stamp on the team, and whether those guys who were part of Clarko's team find themselves a little bit on the outer. So that's my watch for Hawthorn this year.
I guess the only other quick thing, I think they're really going to struggle in the ruck because it's either big boy or a bunch of project guys who are either too old or too young. And the other thing is, how awesome is it to see Hawthorn sucking for a while? It's great. In your face, Hawthorn.